What is up, my dudes and dudettes? Behind that camera is Colleen and I am Todd. And if you are new to this channel, we make these crazy detailed YouTube videos of us converting this 2022 Sprinter cargo van that you see behind me here. Today is all about the floor. We've been rocking this bed rug for the last year and we are so excited to get something hard and stable in the van because that means we can move on to converting the inside of this thing. Now you're going to see some similarities, but you're also going to see some differences. We're going to be doing things just slightly different than what you've seen before while standing on the shoulders of those that came before us, so we really appreciate that. Anyways, we hope at the end of this video, you and this van will be floored. Let's get into it. To template our floor, we're using the bed rug we've had as a temporary floor and 3 sheets of Coroplast. Coro, corrugated, and plastic. And if you've guessed it already, basically cardboard made from plastic. You could use traditional cardboard or ram board here to save some cabbage, but this stuff is a bit more robust, so for us, Coroplast it is. The other nice thing about this stuff is it's easy to process with traditional woodworking tools. Now, I'll be honest here, I've never tried to track saw a sheet of cardboard before, so maybe that would work too, but this stuff, yeah, it cuts like gossip through a small town. After everything was cut, I tri-folded it up and put it in the back of the van where I tri-unfolded it down and inspected my handiwork. Now, there were a few spots where the bed rug was a little bit off, so I made notes on any of these changes that needed to be made when transferring this template to the actual flooring material. Speaking of flooring material, sounds like we're ready to move on to the next chapter in this production. I'm standing next to the heart and soul of our van's flooring system. This is 3 sheets of 1/2-inch Kusa Blue Water 26. Kusa board is super popular in the marine industry, and what it is a high-density closed-cell polyurethane foam that has continuous woven strands of fiberglass embedded inside of it. What that yields is a product that's not only way stronger than marine-grade plywood, but it's actually about 30% lighter too. Not only that, it has better insulating properties, it does not absorb water, and it won't rot. In fact, the only disadvantage is it's about 3 times the cost of a traditional marine-grade plywood, but we think it's well worth it, and that's why it's going on our build. With the templates, we started transferring them to the Kusa. We outlined and modified any of the dimensions we had noted on the templates themselves if they were slightly different from how we wanted them fitted in the van. You'll also notice I offset the edge of the template from the edge of the Kusa board, as some of the edges weren't that great from the factory. The Kusa cuts like butter with traditional woodworking tools. There was no splintering, chipping, or blowouts that I experienced, although it's a little harder on tools because of the abrasive nature, especially jigsaw blades. I went through 2. I also used a Sharpie to mark everything, but it isn't the right tool for the job. Black is surprisingly hard to see on this stuff when you have a track saw track nearby, hence the flashlight. You'll see later in the video I swapped to white lead for my Pika Dry. Don't know what a Pika Dry is? Well, apparently you don't watch any woodworking videos on YouTube. But seriously, changed my life. Now I'm going to be using the factory holes to bolt this floor and some of the cabinets down. To get their location perfectly, I took a M8 by 1.25 bolt, which is the factory thread size, and I cut the head off and turned one end to a point. Don't have a lathe? Well, no worries. You can head over to McMaster Car, which is basically the Tinkerer's Toys R Us, and pick up a cone tip set screw off the shelf instead. Then you can thread these partway into the factory hole locations just so they stick up slightly above the ribs of the van. With those points in place, we can lay down our cut sheet into the van and apply some pressure by walking over the locations of the screws. This leaves a nice mark on the Kusa board, which I drilled with a smaller pilot first and then drilled to the final size for an M8 clearance hole. A couple more tips for you here. Removing the factory D-rings is best done by hand. I had one that was slightly gummed up from the factory, and being able to feel the screw and the torque can prevent you from making the problem worse. I also found that running a tap down through the hole after removing the screw cleaned up the threads and made reinstalling bolts a lot easier. I also cut one panel at a time and kept rechecking with the next template because I noticed things would shift ever so slightly, transferring all the dimensions so many times, bedrock to template and template to Cusa board. This ensured I could control and correct any errors before they would stack up too much. Whoa, who turned out the lights? Anyways, here comes the last panel. I'll say after lugging these sheets of Cusa board around all day, I can appreciate that 30% weight savings more than ever. Wait a second, that shop space I've been working out of looks a little bit different, so let me tell you about it. It's been raining like crazy this week in Marin, but we want to keep the project rolling, so luckily my friend Nick has offered up his shop space for us to continue working on the floor. I thought it'd be a great opportunity to show you the space and talk about what Nick does here. What do you do, Nick?
Well, this space here is used for Neuhaus Metalworks. We produce steel and titanium mountain bike, road bike, and all-road bike frames.
I actually have one of Nick's titanium mountain bikes myself. He's actually the person who got me into mountain biking. Thank you, Nick. I really love it. I enjoy it. The bike rips. It's amazing. Check out Nick at neuhausmetalworks.com. Now you're probably wondering, what does any of this have to do with vans, or floors for that matter? Well, my friends, nothing really, other than the fact that most van people also enjoy riding bikes. Am I right? However, it's mostly that Nick helped me out when I needed a place to work and my garage was temporarily out of order, so I thought it would be awesome to give a little glimpse into what he does at Neuhaus Metalworks here to keep the craft of USA handmade bicycle frames alive and well. Neuhaus builds titanium and steel bicycle frames utilizing additive manufacturing where it counts. Not only does it make the process way more efficient, it allows him to provide stock geometry in up to 16 different sizes, in which he's dubbed full spectrum sizing. This yields a custom fit with proven geometry, which alleviates one of the most common problems when going full custom. That is a bike that fits you but actually might not ride that well. Anyways, we hope you enjoyed this detour back to the van flooring. Before we got started on our insulation, we made sure the van floor was super duper clean. If you have a van with scuffs in the paint, you'll want to mechanically clean those and put down some rust prevention. Luckily for us, the bed rug protected the van very well. One thing I noticed when cleaning the floor that's pretty dang cool is Mercedes actually marks the location of the frame members that are under the van on the van floor. I'm getting ready to plan out my L-track location in the back here, so having these locations is super clutch. I transferred all of those marks as well as some additional things like my cabinet locations and where I plan to run the L-track to the Cusa panels we cut earlier. With all that jazz out of the way, I moved on to the insulation. My first layer here is going down in the van floor ribs, and I'm using 0.3 inch thick mini cell foam that I needed to cut into strips. I found that if I use a nice heavy aluminum bar to hold down the mini cell while cutting and a nice sharp razor blade, it slices through it like a killer whale's dorsal fin glides through water. I also found that if I angle the utility knife slightly when I cut and flip the sheet over between cuts, I get a nice dovetail that fits in the ribs, as Borat would say. Very nice. That was probably the worst Borat impression ever, but hey, I'm converting a van, not trying out for Hollywood here. One more tip, when you start to get these little dingleberries, it's time for a new blade. I went through about 6 blades for all my mini cell cutting on this project. And then using our good old friend 3M90 spray adhesive, I painstakingly filled each rib, valley, ravine, gorge, canyon, crack, crevice, and depression, which is what started to consume me as I slowly lost myself in each void I filled. Or maybe I was just getting high from the fumes. It could have been that too. You know, now thinking back, I probably was high because I remember thinking things like, what if clouds are just fluffy marshmallows we can't reach? Why do we cook bacon and bake cookies? What if trees are actually just really slow motion explosions? And if Cinderella's shoe fit perfectly, why did it fall off in the first place? Anywho, if you're just joining us, we finished the first step of our van's flooring insulation, which is putting this mini cell foam down in each of these cavities and ridges inside of the van here. And it actually took quite a long time to do it like this. Cutting the strips wasn't too bad. I had a pretty good process for that. But gluing this stuff down with the 3M90, there has to be a better way. The stuff is super messy. You have to spray both sides of the equation, the foam and the van skin, let them dry before you can stick them together, which actually takes a ton of time. And not to mention, even with the mask on, I was getting high as hell in here, folks, and pretty much had a headache the whole time. If I were to do this again, I would definitely look for a mini cell foam with an adhesive backing already applied. What is mini cell foam anyways? Well, mini cell foam is a polyethylene foam that's been chemically cross-linked. A byproduct of that chemical cross-linking is there's these tiny micro bubbles of air that are trapped inside of it, hence the name, mini cell. Now those cells are not connected together. That's why it's a closed cell foam, and what that yields is a super lightweight, super resilient waterproof foam that has good insulated properties because it's basically full of air. And we all know that air is a good insulator. Now on top of this, we're going to put a thin layer of Thinsulate. Then we'll go ahead and put another layer of mini cell on top of that that's continuous over the whole thing. And then our Cusa board on top of that. That should yield a lightweight floor that has good acoustic and insulated properties from the thermal perspective. Anyways, one thing you may notice that we didn't include here is sound deadening. And that's because, well, the floor in the van is actually quite resilient. Remember, the main purpose of sound deadener is to act as a mass dampener in our system. Well, there's not really much to dampen on the floor because of all the structures and geometry and the fact that it's welded to the frame in so many places. So we chose to omit it from our build. You can still include it in yours, and that's the beauty of building your own van. You can make these decisions and proceed with your own judgment. All right, I'm marking in the L track here. I'm going to cut out this section and put an L track for mountain bikes. I've got this little end cap. I've actually machined these. They're at anodizing right now, so I'm just using the 3D printed version to basically mark this up. If you're interested, I'm using the Pika Dry. This is a great little pencil for woodworking, but they make this white kind of insert that shows up really well on this Cusa board. I was using the Sharpie before, but it's kind of hard to see. It looks a little bit better in the video than in real life. So we're going to go ahead and hole saw these little sections here on the end, and then we'll rip with the track saw to cut out this section. I am still amazed at how well this stuff cuts, machines, and sands, but I guess it is foam after all, so I shouldn't be too surprised. Anyways, for the L-track mounting, I did exactly as I said I would and hole sawed on either end and connected the dots with the track saw. I did end up having to finish it off with the jigsaw at the end because of the circular nature of the track saw blade. I also wanted to give a shout out to my new 3M WorkTune Connects Plus. I've been looking for a hearing protection set of over-ears that I can still listen to podcasts on while I'm working. So far, these are really nice, and I can wear them for about 3 hours before they start to hurt, so that deserves a little jig. After I finished the L-track cuts, I moved on to cutting strips of 1/4 inch expanded PVC. This is a pretty inexpensive, rigid, decent R-value plastic that will serve as an intermediate structure in key areas under the floor, allowing me to put one more layer of mini cell foam that won't be compressed. Think areas like under the joints for reinforcement, under my cabinets, in areas where there are no floor ribs, and where the factory bolt hole locations are. You can see me referencing back to my cheat sheet that I laid out in CAD with the appropriate dimensions. I made no strip less than 3 inches wide so that no matter where I put it on the floor, it was sure to land on top of a rib since the space between them is less than half this value. For areas that didn't have any ribs, I cut 2 pieces of 1/4 inch to laminate them into 1/2 inch so it would keep the height the same. Also for areas under the L-track and seat, I used FR4 instead, which handles high force compressive loads way better. With everything cut and prepped, I started working on joining it all together. I'm going to be using a biscuit joiner. No, not the buttery, flaky side dish that pairs well with gravy that your mama used to make you, but these little flat football looking discs that are common in woodworking. However, since we're anti-organic on the flooring, we chose nylon grip lock ones instead. Here's what the slots in the flooring edge look like post biscuit joiner. Not only does this help line things up, but it keeps the butt joint perfectly flat. Butt joint. For bonding the floor together, we're using our old friend Sikaflex 252. You might remember him from the Flare Space video, and not only was it a recommended option from Kusa, it has great bonding strength and flexibility, which make it a perfect fit for our floor. We ran a bead along the edge, inserted the biscuits, and then tapped the pieces together with a small piece of leftover expanded PVC and a dead blow hammer. Not pictured here, on the underside of this sheet, we masked about 1 inch off the joint and layered it down with a putty knife, which I'll show you later, and the reason why I have sawdust all over my back in this next shot. For the PVC strips, I also glued these down with Sikaflex 252. Since this stuff is thick like Crisco, I used a putty knife to smear it down like cream cheese on an everything bagel, of course. You can see I marked guidelines to flip the pieces over and apply pressure to get them into place. One thing I learned when assembling that piece in the back is when you pull these off to prep them for glue, they are pretty hard to keep track of. So I gone ahead and labeled them F2, front 6, etc. This can make it a little bit easier with the corresponding lines and numbers on the Kusa board. I'm using Sika Primer 207 on the PVC pieces themselves, whereas the Kusa board, my testing showed good results without it, so I decided to keep that naked. For pumping the Sikaflex, I'm using my DeWalt powered caulking gun, and again I went piece by piece dispensing, knocking it down a bit with the putty knife and applying the pieces down to the Kusa board directly. Once I had all the PVC pieces in place, I went ahead and started filling in all the spaces between them with 1/4 inch mini cell foam. The nice thing about this stuff is I would lay it over the space I needed to fill and press it down around the edges. This would create an indent, or a perfect template for where I needed to cut. Originally I was cutting with a utility knife, but some of the shapes were pretty complex, and it seemed to work a lot better using a pair of sharp scissors instead. For the areas that have Sikaflex overflow, I needed to sand those down a bit in order to get the glue to stick. And to glue these down, it's all the usual suspects, folks. Our good friend 3M90 back again. I used a cardboard box to block off the area, and just like we always do, sprayed both sides, waited for it to dry, and then stuck them together. The nice thing about this method is it works for super complex shapes too, like this one around the wheel well. There's a lot going on here, but look at how well it fits straight from the slice of the snipping scissors. The last thing I did to finish this step was to cut these little spacers for the anchor points around the vent. These give extra support in the low-lying areas. I used the holes themselves to get the position correct on where they needed to line up and to make sure they didn't collide with any of the nearby ribs. I let all the Sika joints cure for a full day and then came back for the final layer, a sheet of 8mm thick Thinsulate SM200L. This is similar material that's found in your performance winter synthetic jackets. It's hydrophobic and, like the rest of our floor materials, won't absorb water and won't rot. I found a market for cutting. The dot marking method with a Sharpie worked best. Alright, the floor has been completely prepped here. And we've got this going in. You can see I put a sheet of 8mm Thinsulate over the entire area here. I just went ahead and glued it with 3M90. This stuff here around the outside perimeter. All the stuff in the middle is able to free float and kind of fill in the gaps. Here's the floor all mounted in. It fit like a glove. Colleen and I were able to lift it by ourselves as one piece. It's pretty lightweight. And we just have to finish the L-track and put the lawn seal on top. Pretty excited with how this turned out. And the last thing we did is put in our L-track with our custom machined end caps. These turned out really, really nice. Well, friends, we're going to stop this one right here. We will cover the rest of the L-track mounting, the custom fab solution for our step overhang, and what we are going to put on top of this Kusa board in upcoming videos. For this project, it's definitely DIY beginner friendly. If you have experience with woodworking tools, if you don't and you're planning on converting a van, I would suggest to polish those up or partner with somebody who can help guide you through it. But overall, this project is not that bad. We spent about $1,400 on this floor. That sounds like a lot, I know, especially when compared to other DIY solutions, but this is the foundation of our van, and this is an adventure van, which is going to see a lot of water, snow, dirt, mud. We have dogs, so we wanted to make sure that this floor is as resilient as possible to those elements. For the total time, it probably took about 3 to 4 full days. It actually does take a lot of time templating and transferring those templates to the boards and making all those cuts and then pulling those sheets back in and checking them for fitment. It's not for the faint of heart if you're trying to knock something out quick. I would say really take your time on this because again, this is such a foundational element of your van build. Whew. Okay, that was a lot of talking. If you like what we are doing, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up. It really does help us out. If you like the new format where we jump right in and skip the crazy intro, go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section below. If you want to learn more about this floor, you can also leave any comments down there. I'm just rambling at this point. Whatever. Go ahead, go down there, slap the subscribe button. We'll see you next time. Flooring system. This is 3 sheets of car. A long time. Now cutting the strips wasn't, what is up with all these freaking cars driving by? Tell us what you do here.
Well, this is the home of Neuhaus Metalworks. We make steel and titanium bicycle frames. Shit, what else do I do here?